go. Here. Okay, now in the unmute. Okay, working with the unmute. We're all learning as we go. Anyway, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I'm Angela Franco. I'm the interim President and CEO of the DC Chamber of Commerce, and happy to be with you this morning, learning together about the PPP program, the Payroll Protection Program event. You know, last week, we started an initiative with the Office of Economic Development to support businesses in providing one-on-one technical assistance and supporting them in the application to this payroll protection program. We're partnering with the small CPA firms and at this point with the Latino Economic Development Corporation to apply for the loans. We have reached out to several banks, but as you know, the cutoff date is August 8th. So we have reached out to several financial organizations, and at this point, LEDC is the one doing them until August 6th. So we'll have to work together and work fast to see this happen for you and your business or your organization. Here at the DC Chamber, we strive to educate, connect, and provide technical assistance to better support the business community. And this is an additional training that we're doing in partnership with the government, whom we're working together with to support the business community and move forward, especially during these difficult times. Now, I would like, I want to thank the staff at the DC Chamber, to Natalie Harris, Erica Waddington, to Linda Curry for leading this event, for Lucky that is behind the scenes. Thank you so much for being part of this wonderful initiative. And to the Office of Economic Development, our partner here, and to all of you, congratulations for taking the initiative to be part of this training today. Now I would like to introduce our first presenter, Chris Pan. He's a former SBA special advisor, and he has been working on a national level, providing training to small businesses across the country. So Chris, thank you so much for your participation this morning. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us and our small businesses, and I'm gonna turn it over to you.
Sure, thanks so much for the invitation to come and speak with you all. Could we throw up the slideshow by chance? There we go, great. So again, my name is Chris. I am a former SBA employee. I most previously served at the SBA as special advisor for public engagement, which means my job was to really help translate what was going on at the SBA in support of our field offices and our communication shop to local small business owners like yourself. So I have a series of slides to show you that will provide you with some key information about what's going on and what we can expect for the PPP program leading up to the August 8th closing. So if we could jump ahead to the next slide and next. So obviously COVID-19 has dramatically impacted US small businesses. Fortunately, there are a number of programs that help small businesses, are trying to help small businesses as we speak. One of them being the PPP program. Originally, it was scheduled to end on June 30th, but they've extended it to August 8th, which is great. The program specifically meant to help small businesses maintain their payroll and cover a few extra costs like rent, utilities, and mortgage interest. Next slide. Logistics, I think we can pass on that one and go to the next slide. We can skip that one as well. Sorry, folks. And then there's a picture of me. Next slide, please. So two things we're going to cover in this webinar is one, whether or not you qualify, and then two, how do you apply for the program? On the next slide, you'll see, oh, go ahead. There we go. These loans, so just a little bit of background information about the PPP loans. first and foremost, the loans are authorized by banks and lenders. So they're not loans given directly by the SBA. As Angela mentioned, LADC sounds like it's a lender that's still providing PPP loans, so that's important to know. Other lenders are providing, although some have shut down their PPP lending just because they've decided that they no longer want to pursue these loans. So it's always important to figure out which banks are still providing these loans as we are close to the end time. These loans are meant to cover these loans will be provided to you for 2.5 months worth of salary, up to 10 million. They can also provide you 2.5 months worth of amount that you pay in mortgage interest, in rent, and in certain utilities. So there's a cap to the total amount of dollars, but these other bills as well as your payroll and certain benefits will be covered for 2.5 months worth is how much you'll get the loan for. Loans are available until 8/8/20. The loan funds must be used within 24 weeks of loan disbursement. That means once you get the cash in hand in your bank account, you'll have 24 weeks to spend it. You don't have to spend it for the entire 24 weeks, and you don't have to keep payroll at the same level for all 24 weeks, but you just have that amount of time to spread out the funds and use them. The loan can be entirely forgiven. However, the parts that are not will be repaid at 1% interest. And there is no collateral required, so you don't have to put up any housing or any cars or anything like that to get the loan. Next slide, please. So who qualifies for this? Full-time and part-time employees do not qualify. So if you're a full-time or part-time employee receiving benefits and payroll, you're not able to qualify for this program. Nonprofits can qualify, businesses can qualify, regardless of the entity. So multi-member LLCs, single-member LLCs, LPs, S Corp, C Corp, and this information can be found on your articles of organization as to what type of company you formed if you don't know that. And then independent contractors and the self-employed can apply. Now, independent contractors, self-employed, and sole proprietors, up to about yesterday, were able to apply for unemployment as well. So you want to check as they continue to negotiate the next stimulus package, if independent contractor or self-employed prefers to go for the unemployment check versus the PPP loan, you should go ahead and check with the DC Department of Employment Services to figure out if that route. I would recommend you only really do one, because double dipping in both can be seen as an act that's not appropriate. So you really should decide if you want to get the PPP loan or go for unemployment. Next slide, please. So knowing whether or not you qualify comes down to a certain couple of steps. The first is the SBA requires you to make a certain amount a year to be a small business. It depends on the industry that you're in. So some industries, there's a cap where if you make more than 2 million annually, you are no longer a small business. For some industries, it's up to 10 million. Going to sba.gov/size standards to figure out what your industry is will help you determine whether or not you qualify as a small business for this loan. The law also requires that you have 500 or fewer employees to qualify for this loan, with the very few exceptions. So it's general rule that if you have over 500 employees, you won't qualify for an SBA PPP loan. Important information for franchisees is that if franchisees are allowed to apply for the PPP loan, so long as their franchisor is registered on SBA's franchise directory, which you can find at sba.gov/SBA franchise directory. So if you own a McDonald's and operate a McDonald's, you are able, because McDonald's corporate filed with the SBA franchise directory. So you should check if you own a franchise and are looking to apply for a PPP loan, you should check to see if your franchisor is in that franchise directory. If they're not, you should call them up to try and get them to register quickly. I know they've been expediting those certifications for the franchise directory for franchisors. So that is going to be a requirement if you are a franchise owner. As I mentioned before, sole proprietors and independent contractors can apply for this program. And then the last thing I mentioned is businesses must be 81+% owned by US citizens, permanent naturalized residents, or specific immigration classes. So for instance, asylum seekers are allowed to apply. The SBA has specific rules around which types of non-permanent residents, or rather what types of immigrants classifications can apply. So I think to best check on that is to go to SBA's website and look up the SOP for lending on their 7(a) programs. If you're qualified, that's great. We can go now to the next step, which is the application process. Next slide, please. So if you're qualified to apply for an SBA loan, the first step is to really talk to an SBA approved lenders. Most national banks, some smaller banks, and some credit unions are lenders. So are minority financial institutions, as well as CDFIs, community development financial institutions, as well as a few other online pay lenders like Cabbage and QuickBooks. The website you see linked there on the screen will provide you a full list of SBA Paycheck Protection Program participant lenders. You can also go to your SBA district office to find lenders on its website, or you can call them up and find out which lenders are qualified. Luckily for you all, and lender is going to be on this call and talking momentarily about their PPP loan process. So you already know one there. Next slide, please. So the application process, it requires a bit of documentation. I would first and foremost recommend, if you have a financial advisor for your business or a financial planner or a bookkeeper, it's great to consult with them because they will know the circumstances of your individual business and be able to advise you specifically on what your business needs are in terms of application process, along with your lender. The SBA has a certain number of lending institutions to provide PPP loans, as I mentioned earlier. It's highly recommended that, if possible, you work with an existing banking partner, because if you have a business bank account with a bank already, they are likely to give you the PPP loan because they already have you as an existing business partner. Sometimes, and I will let LADC speak for themselves, but I have heard that some lenders are requiring you open bank accounts at their banks if you're not a current borrower or savings account holder with them. Lenders will ask you for like I mentioned, a bunch of documentation. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see what that documentation is. A lot of them will ask you for payroll tax filings with the IRS or state and local government as of February 15, 2020. The reason for that is that the SBA's and the legislation have ruled that 2/15/20 is the date when and around the pandemic started affecting everybody. So they oftentimes want documentation before or on 2/15/20 to be able to say what you were at your pre-pandemic levels. So that's payroll tax filings are really important for if you're a business. If you're a sole proprietor or independent contractor, having any payroll tax filings, 1099s, income and expense reports will substitute for that since you don't get payroll. So those are really important documents to have available. Other documents that you should really have available for your PPP loan application is your 2009 tax return as filed with the IRS for the business and for the business owners of the organization. You'll need proof of business ownership, which is a certificate of organization or articles of incorporation. That's for anyone that has an LLC, an LP, an S Corp, a C Corp. If you're an independent contractor or sole proprietor, you don't necessarily need to have those types of documents. They may ask you for other documentation to prove that your business is in existence, like a trade name certification or something like that. Importantly, you're going to need the name, the title, the ownership percentage, and the either employee identification number or social security number of anyone who owns more than 20% of the firm. So if you're anyone that owns more than 20%, whether they're a business or an individual, you will need to gather that information ahead of time. You'll also need proof of your business was operational from on February 15, 2020 and the payroll level you were at there. You'll need proof of employer contributions to health and retirement accounts, proof of business mortgage payments as of 2/15/20, proof of business rent as of 2/15/20, and proof of utility bills as of 2/15/20. What that's going to do is help level set for the banker exactly where you were before the pandemic started affecting our businesses and be able to calculate your amount of the loan that you're going to get. Lenders are allowed to ask for other documentation. So just be prepared to work with your lender to figure out what documentation they need. Next slide, please. So tips for applying for a PPP loan. Larger banks may require you to use an online portal. So for instance, I applied for my PPP loan through Bank of America. I did everything through an online portal, and then they eventually reached out to me for documentation because I didn't supply the right documents that they were exactly looking for. Smaller banks, CDFIs, other lending institutions may have you actually talk to somebody that's a lending specialist. Either system works, but if you have a preference, just think about that as you plan your outreach. The second tip I have is make sure you specifically ask for the PPP loan application. We have heard with some lenders that unfortunately, when people called for the PPP loan, they were being pushed to other loan products that carry a higher interest rate and don't have the loan forgiven. So just make sure that when you're talking to those lenders that you are clear that you want the PPP loan because you want the loan forgiveness, or because, because you're needing it to cover payroll and other expenses that you want covered under PPP. Don't be discouraged if one bank doesn't agree to give you a loan. Different banks are allowed to set different standards and rules around who they will loan to. If you're declined by one PPP lender for a loan, you can try a different PPP lender. That said, if the bank says the SBA declined the loan, that may mean that you're not qualified, but you'll know that specifically from the lender if there is a decline for any reason. Just make sure to ask them specifically if it was the SBA declining or them declining the loan. Again, get your paperwork together. Documentation is important. Having good records is important. Make sure your books are up to date. If you don't have books, make sure you have good and clear receipts. The last thing I would say is just be confident. You know, you run a business. You've been running a business as an individual or as a team for a while now. You already know what it takes to succeed, and sometimes you know it takes persistence. So just make sure you carry on with that persistence. Next slide, please. So how do I get the loan forgiven? It's a key question that I already saw pop up in the chat a little bit, and I want to run through those qualifications. You have to use 60+% of the loan for payroll and benefits to employees of the business. That can include business owners, though different rules apply for different corporation types. So it's important to talk to your financial advisor. So for instance, LLCs can take their draw as a prorated amount and take that as salary, and it will count. But for people who are on C Corps and S Corps, for instance, usually you can only take your employment salary, your monthly take, and not take the extra profit that you take in distributions at the end of the year. The remaining amount, up to 40%, must be used for mortgage interest, rent, and utilities held prior to 2/15 for forgiveness, which means you have to have had that rent agreement, that mortgage agreement, the utility bills. You couldn't have started them after February 15th, 2020. So if they were started before that, then you can cover those things. I want to make sure to highlight that we're talking about mortgage interest, not mortgage principal for your business. So if your business has a mortgage on an office, you can't cover the principal of your mortgage under the PPP loan and get it forgiven. You can only cover the interest. A couple quick notes for this, for the stipulations around this money being used. Payroll costs for full-time or part-time employees are covered up to $100,000 per year that you can keep on payroll and rehire for within the 24 weeks of loan disbursement. So basically, if you make $150,000 in base salary, you can only be covered up to $100,000. You'll only get the loan amount, and you'll only be covered for up to $100,000 of your salary for the given amount of time. So you can't cover yourself above that. It's important to note also that salaries should not be dropped below 25% of original pay level, with some exceptions. So if you pay someone $50,000 a year, you should cover their payroll for the 2.5 months time for $50,000 a year to ensure that you get the full forgiveness of the loan. If you drop that $50,000 person to annual to $30,000, you may not receive the full forgiveness amount for that salary. Paid leave. So you're able to cover certain types of paid leave: paid family leave, sick leave, medical leave, vacation time for qualified employees. There are a few exceptions. Primarily the paid leave and the sick leave and the family leave, you can't cover it if you also took a tax credit on the coronavirus bill, the first coronavirus bill that allowed you to take tax credit for that forgiven amount. You can cover employee severance for qualified employees. So if you did have to let go of somebody for cause, as long as you have documentation, you can cover their severance payment under the PPP loan and have it forgiven. Business share of healthcare benefits, including premiums for qualified employees. So the business share of premiums can be covered. Also, the business share of retirement benefits for qualified employees can be covered. This gets a little tricky with the SBA rules because you're not allowed to cover you're not allowed to cover owners if you're in an S Corp, but you can under a C Corp or LLC. Again, I'll reiterate, the mortgage interest or rent committed prior to February 15th is covered, and so are the utilities. Some rules and restrictions you should know about. If you're an employee or you make more than 100,000 a year, any portion above 100K will not be counted. You must use the funds to retain or rehire employees with a few exceptions. So for instance, if you fired someone for cause, that's okay, as long as you have the documented paperwork. It's also okay if you tried to hire someone back and you put that in writing and they reject that offer, you're then exempt from having that amount removed from your accepted forgiveness amount. And then your employees need to have a primary residence in the United States. So they have to have an address where you file their payroll tax filings in the US for them to qualify to have their payroll forgiven. Next slide, please. So here's an example. So Suzanne and her husband run a small grocery store in Ward 4. They have two employees, but had to lay one off because of the economic downturn due to the pandemic. They want to rehire that employee and get help covering the costs of their other employee. The grocery store has been around since 2017, and they are officially incorporated. Suzanne applies for the PPP loan to cover costs of her salary, her husband's salary, the current employee's salary, and the salary of the person they want to rehire for a number of weeks within the 24-week span after they sign the loan disbursements. None of them make more than $100,000 a year. Suzanne also wants to cover the mortgage on her store, the water bill, the electricity bill, and the internet bill, but she can't afford to pay back all this money right now. Suzanne's in luck. Most of her costs can be paid for through the PPP loan and are also forgiven. The only thing that she can't cover is her mortgage principal, but she can cover the mortgage interest. If she uses the loan for her total mortgage payment, she'll have to pay back the portion of the loan used on the mortgage principal with some interest to the bank for over the next 2 years. But there's no payments in the first 6 months. The rest of the loan can be forgiven as long as she can document those costs that were used for those approved reasons. Next slide, please. So if you're interested in getting more information or if there are other questions outstanding, you can definitely contact the DC Chamber of Commerce. You can also contact the SBA itself and SBA resource partners. You can see them listed here below. These are folks that are professionals that will help you through the loan process in terms of getting your documentation ready along with your lender, and they can also help provide any sort of additional guidance in terms of what information that might be sought and what documentation is approved for usage. Next slide.
Yeah,
okay.
Chris, this is Angela. Before you continue, I just want to tell everybody that we're going to have questions and answers at the end. So if there's questions, you can write them down, and at the end, we'll answer them.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think now to give us our lender's perspective, I'll introduce Antonio. So Antonio is a small business lending officer with LADC in the Baltimore area. He was born and raised in Honduras, graduated from the University of San Pedro Sula with a BS in Industrial Engineering and recently completed an MBA in Finance at the Loyola University, Maryland. Throughout his years, he supported several charities and volunteer initiatives, most recently with LADC. He supports the DMV small business community with lending and access to capital events. So I'll hand it over to Antonio.
Thank you, Chris. So what I would like to do is share my screen. Believe I can't.
You can now, Antonio.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. And so, I think it would be more efficient if I walk you through our application process. Which is why I wanted to share my screen with you. Just give me 1 second here. And just a little bit about LADC. We are a nonprofit micro lender. What we are not is a bank, so you're not required to have a bank account with us because we don't take any deposits. So in that regards, we are more flexible. CDFI, Chris mentioned, CDFIs and what CDFIs are basically are community development institutions. And as such, we strive to give underserved communities access to responsible lending or access to capital. And let me just say, also, I'm also an underwriter, so I'm working in the back end, processing these applications. And as any other loan application, the underwriter's responsibility basically is just to verify the information, and in this case, verifying the apply for loan amount for that PPP, right? So you can find us at ledcmetro.org, and specifically for the PPP application, it can be found at ledcmetro.org/SBA PPP. I'm going to write it down in the chat as well. And so basically, it's a two-step application process, right? In this portal here, you're going to find the apply here link, and then you're going to find also, which is pretty much the first step. And this is pretty much a intake application. It is going to take you around 10 minutes average, and we're going to gather just general information about the owners and also about the business, right? Any owner with 20% ownership or above needs to complete one of these intake forms. And once we get the intake form, a loan officer or business coach is going to get back to you with another follow-through email with the same requirements listed here, so that you can go ahead and send them over. Now that is the first step. We do need that intake application form, which is our LEDC application. And then we are also, this is where I think that most applicants feel more overwhelmed when they see these, these requirements. And this is just the general requirements for all business types. And what I mean here, you're definitely going to have to complete the SBA application, which is called the PPP borrower application form. You can download it here. And then also the certification of beneficial ownership form. If you do need help, I'm also going to share a number that you can call so that you can get in contact with one of our business coaches, and they're going to help you fill out any of these forms or give you any more information regarding all the other requirements. If you are not confident about applying, you can also call them and they will help you walk you through the same process. Okay, let me just dismiss here right now. So pretty quickly, just affirmation documents, you're gonna need those as well. Driver's license and just checking your citizenship status is a must because of the SBA. Also, your tax returns are very important, as well as your payroll tax filings as well. I believe Chris mentioned those too. As an underwriter, we may require you to not only submit one, but also 2 or 3, as we are trying to verify that payroll amount. Okay, so just be mindful and be sure that you follow, you stay in contact with your underwriter, just in case we need more documentation. In the bottom here, you're going to find information about, well, these resources are very important. I find them very useful, especially this one here, how to calculate maximum loan amounts by business type, because as a lender, I find it that owners have the most trouble calculating their loan amount, and even their accountants. So this right here is going to walk you step by step on how to calculate your eligible loan amount based on your payroll amount by business type. So for example, if you are self-employed or a contractor, this is going to tell you how to calculate it so that you're more confident on applying and filling out those applications. And if you're a corporation, if you're a nonprofit, or filing as a sole proprietor, everything is here. It can walk you step by step, walk you through step by step on what we need also, and additional documentation that you may be required as well. And like I said, once you fill out this intake application form, one of the business coaches or even loan officer like myself is going to follow through with an email. In that email, I'm also going to provide a link to a secure portal where you can upload your documents, right? And this is pretty much, you won't have to create a user account with an email address and a password, okay? And this is just for your own safety, because we understand that you are sending sensitive information as well. And then what else can I talk to you about right now is Forgiveness, I understand that we're going to have a separate webinar for that, but also you are able to look at our PowerPoint presentations for forgiveness here and other forgiveness instructions as well. So I will recommend you go through this. Just be mindful also of time that we have the deadline coming up, approaching for August the 8th. So the sooner that you apply, the better. And like I said, if you're not confident, I'm going to share with you the number where you can call our business coaches and talk to them and see if you're eligible. And, you know, I understand that the PPP may be a little bit restrictive and how the applicants can become confused. But it was designed mostly for, you know, retaining your payroll and helping your payroll. So if you do need help with your operating expenses, I would recommend you try the SBA's Economic Injury Disaster Loan, and you can reach out to the SBA for that link as well, which is a little bit more open, and you can, and you know, if you haven't done yet, be sure to do that as well. So yes, this is pretty much our process. Because of COVID, we are not doing any in-person consultations right now, but like I said, I'm gonna direct you to that number so that you can go ahead and talk to one of our business coaches. You can submit the paperwork via email through that secure portal. If you don't have a scanner at home, you can always go to a Staples or a FedEx office, or even, you know, download one of those scanner apps like CamScan, and be sure to, you know, send clear documentation so that we can proceed to process your information as well. And that pretty much is what the process looks like with us. I do encourage you to apply sooner rather than later because of that looming deadline. And let me just go ahead and stop sharing right now. And I'd also like to introduce our next guest presenter. So the next presenter is Mr. Robert C. Bob. He is President and CEO of the Robert Bob Group, LLC. He is a private consultant working in the private and public sectors, and he specializes in restructuring and turning around management consulting. His primary objective is to help governments, schools, and businesses as well with financial and operational solutions and achieving greater efficiency and long-term viability. He's also worked with the DC government as well and appointed for the Nonprofit Hospital Corporation Board of Directors in 2019. So without further ado, give you Mr. Robert C. Bob, and I'm gonna share the LADC's SBA PPP loan application webpage right now, and also the number where you can call our business coach. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. I was asked to give my experience of my company. We've been through the original PPP loan process, and we found it to be somewhat of an onerous process, but thankfully along the way, there were a number of webinars that we participated in from various organizations, and in fact from some accounting firms. But we made the decision that we would process our application on our own. We spent a considerable amount of time reviewing and understanding the process from SBA. And so we reviewed all those documents. I might add, we reviewed the documents over and over again, actually before we started the process. And then we prepared, as was detailed in a couple of the presentations, all of the requirements that were, all of the documentation that were required to file our application online. And so we did all of the process online. Our bank in this case was Bank of America. They were helpful along the way. I would say helpful, but they were in constant communication with us via email. So one of the downside for a small business, particularly in working with very large institutions, is that there is not a person that you can pick up the phone and call if you have a specific question, and we found that to be the case. Even the chat room we didn't find the chat room to be very helpful along the way as well. But we prevailed. We completed all of our documentations. We submitted the information through the online service. Our first time around, the first application we submitted, there were a lot of questions they sent back, and so we resubmitted. And so after a period of time, on the second submission, our application was approved. One of the mistakes that we made early on in our application process was, after gathering all of our information, it's really critical that if you're not using your financial advisor or CPA firm, if you're doing it on your own, you really have to make sure that you have all of your documentation with respect to your business and all of your business payroll, etc. But one of the questions we couldn't get answered along the way is, should we include our 1099 employees? And so we just made the decision that since we couldn't get an answer, or if we got an answer, we didn't want to believe the answer, but we submitted our application and we included our 1099 payroll as well as our permanent employees. And so when our loan was approved, it was approved minus the 1099s that we included. We also reached out to a number of our friends who had business associates who had filed similarly. They too had included their 1099s, and so so we confirmed that their 1099 employees were rejected as well. So we just moved forward and accepted the loan that was that we had applied for. So in the end, we found the process to be fairly efficient. However, had we used, I believe, an accounting firm or a bank, some consultants along the way, it probably would have saved us some time. I might also add that we participated in a White House outreach program to small businesses under the PPP program that was sponsored by Operation Hope, and that we found our experience to be similar to a number of firms across the country who had submitted its application, particularly in working with large institutions. The lesson learned for me, and I think for a number of individuals that we have nationally, is that there's much more time and attention given to small businesses going through this process were they to use a regional bank or an institution similar to what Antonio's institution, because there's a lot of I would say hand holding. I think in the process, you need someone. We're just accustomed when there's an issue to pick up the phone or to make an arrangement to have a conversation with someone on a technical side that can help facilitate any of the questions that we found. But we did not find that to be the case, particularly working with a large institution like Bank of America, and some of my colleagues around the country seem to believe that the process is a lot more efficient working with small bank, your community bank, your hometown small bankers, etc. So now we are attending seminars with respect to a webinar, I should say, with respect to the loan forgiveness program, because we now that we've been approved, we're spending the funds. We want to know the next step with respect to the loan forgiveness, and how do we work our way through that process, given the documentation that we have, so that we, we submit and we file appropriately. Thank you. I mean, I'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone might have as well.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bob. That was very, very helpful. This is Angela. Thank you for your participation and for sharing your experience with other businesses. We are going to go now to our question and answers. So if you have any questions, you can write them now on the board. We have some questions already on the side. Chris, you want to go over them and read them?
Sure. Let me see here. What documentation can we prep in advance for the PPP loan forgiveness? I'll take a stab at that, and then maybe Antonio might have some insights as well. So the important things to have in mind are any sort of payroll stubs, payroll reports rather, that of the salaries that you paid out during the time after the loan has been dispersed that you want to count towards forgiveness is really important to have. A documentation of that from ADP or your payroll lender, Paycheck Program, or whatever you use to pay out whatever you use to pay out payroll is important. Also, same with benefits, whatever your employer benefits that you're covering were paid out will also be important. And then mortgage payments, rent payments, and utility payments for the time that you elect to use your funds from the PPP are also important. Antonio, do you have any other thoughts, or Bob, Robert?
Yeah, I would say that one of the bailouts for us is the fact that we are using the ADP process, and that information was easily and readily available to us, and that helped to facilitate our loan application process.
Yes, and also I wanted to add, I will encourage everybody to go into the link that I provided and check those resources. There's a couple of documents there that can walk you through the forgiveness, but just expanding on what Chris said, just be able to track down your payroll expenses on for the cover period. That is pretty much it, right? And that can be done through that payroll processing that you guys as business owners carry, or if you're an independent contractor, just be sure that you are able to track that record that payment as your payroll as well.
Another question we got was, we have not filed our 2019 taxes. Can we use our 2018 taxes? Antonio, do you want to take a stab at that?
Sure. So we do require at least to provide the tax extension document in order to proceed with that. But if you don't have the 2019 taxes, we can always work with the 2018s, but you will be required to provide a separate profit and loss for 2018 and also an updated balance sheet, which usually we get from the business tax filings, but because we are not working with the 2019s, we require those additional documents as well.
Yeah. Okay, another question, will these slides be available? So this presentation is being recorded and actually will be made available by the DC Chamber, if I'm correct in that. So you'll be able to see all of this. Do you have any guidance for companies who received a PPP loan in April but may be eligible for a second PPP loan? So as of right now, there's not an ability to get a second PPP loan. Congress is taking that up as a possible provision of the next coronavirus bill, but as of right now, you can only apply for one PPP loan per business. So as of right now, that's unfortunately the case. Let's see. How does PPP loan forgiveness work with EIDL advance loan? Antonio, do you want to take a first shot at that, and I can help out as well?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I was reading the
Oh,
chat.
sorry. How does PPP forgiveness work with EIDL advance loan?
Okay, right. So okay, so the economic injury disaster loan, what you can do with a PPP is pretty much refinance that at a 1% interest rate for up to 5 years. And the way it works is, I believe there is, I don't remember the exact date, but prior to a date, and because of the flexible act had been enacted before that, yeah, you can always refinance your economic injury disaster loan through your PPP loan. I will have to get back to you on what date that is, because I don't remember that right now.
Yeah.
But prior to that date, I believe that you are not able to refinance, and after that date, you are.
Yeah, that's right. I don't remember the date exactly myself, but there's a window of time where if you received an EIDL loan, you can refinance that into a PPP loan, make that a smaller interest payment. But recognize when you do that, that your amount of time to pay back the loan, I believe, also decreases, because EIDL loans can be paid back over 30 years, where PPP loans are paid back over 2.
Sure.
Next question we have is from Alice. If you operate your business from your home, what percentage of mortgage interest and utilities can you pay with with PPP money? Also, which utilities can you pay with PPP? You can pay for most utilities. I think the one that is a little murky is a cell phone bill, but you can pay for water, electricity, sewage, any utilities that come with the infrastructure of your building, your office. Internet can all be covered. In terms of your first question of what percentage of mortgage interest, I don't know if, Antonio, you have any guidance on this. I've been telling people that if you have a home office and you take a tax deduction on that home office for a percentage of your mortgage on your tax filings, so at least you can count probably that amount of they can prorate the interest around that percentage of your home to cover for PPP forgiveness. But I don't know if you have any other additional insights from LEDC's perspective.
No, that's about it, Chris. But also just as a general rule, you can use the PPP proceeds up to 40% of that towards the mortgage interest and also the utilities and the insurance cost as well. And the other 60% must be used for retaining or paying for payroll. Mm-hmm. But just like you said, that I will go with that.
Perfect. All right, let's see. Next one is from Rob. Can you go into more detail about payments to LLC members as draws? What backup info is needed? Bank of America would not include draws and only use payroll made to employees to calculate the loan. So that's interesting because under the rules, an LLC members, it depends on what draws you took. If you took guaranteed payments in 2019, you can prorate that into 2.5 months worth of salary and use that calculated number as part of your payroll expense. At least that was my experience with Bank of America. If you took profit distributions, that's where things get a little trickier, and they don't necessarily allow for taking of that amount for the loan. I don't know if Robert or Antonio have anything to add to that, but that's been my experience.
Yeah, the only thing that I can add about that is that it will depend also on the way that you are filing. If you're filing as a sole proprietor or a partnership or a corporation, those things need to be taken into consideration when calculating the PPP loan amount. And also you can find that how to exactly calculate that PPP loan amount in the resources guide in the web page that I provided. Because that is very tricky.
We stayed away from that question altogether.
Yeah, you just filed for your employees.
We just filed for the employees. We didn't.
Yeah, which is a safe way to do it for sure, to make sure that you get the maximum loan forgiveness. We have time for a few more. Let's see. Can you please provide the timeline again when companies can start the loan forgiveness process? So the loan forgiveness process, it depends. it's a little complicated. Generally, you have 24 weeks, especially if you apply any loan that's applied for now, you have 24 weeks to spend the cash. You don't have to spend it across 24 weeks. You can spend it during those 24 weeks in some window that you determine. And then in terms of starting the loan forgiveness process, that really depends on your lender. So for instance, my lender was Bank of America. They're not opening their portal until August to start processing loan forgiveness applications. And so for me, even though I got my loan, I think in May, and my 8 weeks are up, I can't apply for the loan forgiveness until, or June rather, I can't apply for the loan forgiveness until August. I don't know, Antonio, if you have any insights from LEDC's perspective, or Robert, if you have any insights from your application process.
No,
Sure.
from our process, yeah, no, we received the same information because we're with Bank of America, and so
Okay.
we're just preparing all the documents and making sure that we have everything in place, so when the portal does open up, we're able to file the paperwork almost immediately.
Yes, so we have already started processing forgiveness for applicants that already cover their 8 weeks period. But like Chris mentioned, once you're done with your covered period, whichever that may be, between the 8 weeks to the 24 weeks, I believe you have 10 months to apply for forgiveness. However, just be mindful that during those time you are accruing interest on that loan. So the sooner that you can apply to the forgiveness, the better. You need to apply for forgiveness after you've done with your covered period.
I think we have time for one or two more. And anyone feel free to, or Angela, feel free to interrupt me if I'm going over time at any point.
Thank you. No problem. No problem. Let's keep going. We still have like 4 minutes.
Okay. What's the earliest we can submit PPP loan forgiveness after receipt? We just kind of went through that. Again, it just depends on your lender. So I would contact your lender and talk to them about this. Try and get someone on the phone, or if they have an email, you can do that as well, to figure out what their process is for loan forgiveness. The next question was, does the EIDL advance need to be deducted from PPP forgiveness amount? I don't believe the EIDL advance needs to be deducted from the forgiven amount, but tell me if I'm wrong, Antonio, on that.
It doesn't need to be deducted from the PPP loan amount.
Okay.
In my understanding, yeah.
Yeah, so I think what does need to happen is sometimes that you will be asked to refinance your EIDL advance into the PPP loan, but that just means that it will be part of the package of PPP money that you have to either repay back or get forgiven. It's not that it's, it needs to be deducted from the actual PPP forgiveness amount. Last question I have on here is, what about if an employee quits after receiving PPP? So this is one of the exemptions. If an employee quits after you've received your PPP loan, you just need to make sure that that is documented. So in some way, whether it's, their 2 weeks notice, or, some sort of letter acknowledging that they quit, that is something that you just need to document in order to prove to the bank that you did that. I'll let Antonio speak if there's any other stipulations from his example from LEDC. Oh, I think you're on mute. Oh, he can't unmute himself. There we go.
Yes, sorry about that. I was muted. No, just like you said, Chris, there's a few other exceptions, and we understand that for whatever reason, business owners are not going to be able to retain or bring back their force, the employees. For some employees, being on unemployment makes more sense than PPP. So, like you said, just be able to document. There's a few of those exceptions. So just be able to document that with your lender as well.
We just got a question from Solana. What documents do independent contractors need to prep for the PPP loan forgiveness part? So if you're an independent contractor that applied for a PPP loan, your best bet is to have documentation proving your disbursement of your funds. So say you have a business account and then you transfer into your personal account, make sure that that documentation is available. If you only have a personal banking account, I would say just make sure you document either transfers in between personal checking and savings, or actually it's mostly probably important to have the proof of the other 40%, of the other percentages of what you use your money for. Antonio, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this. I don't have as much clarity on this as you might. Oh, I think he's muted again.
No, that's fine. Like you said, Chris, I mean, just be able to document those transfers from the accounts. Just like you said it, that's, you know, the way to go right now for contractors, independent contractors.
Any other questions?
Let me see. Well, if anybody else has questions moving forward, you can direct your questions to Currie, LCURRIE at dcchamber.org. She put her email on the chat as well. And we're going to be posting this training online. So you can go back and listen to it again or share it with anybody that was not able to participate this morning. I think that with that, it's 12:29. Any final words, Chris or Antonio or Mr. Bob?
Thanks to all of you for listening. I think hopefully this was helpful, and you know, just if you really want that PPP loan, keep trying. It seems like it's a lot, but once you get all the documents together, as Bob mentioned, you know, it starts to move a little fast. It starts to move a little easier.
Yes,
Yeah,
if it seems that we don't have you know, all the answers for all these questions, it's because there's a lot of different considerations depending on the business type. But I do encourage you to talk to a business coach, you know, because it's a case-by-case basis, so you can get a clearer picture on the application as well as forgiveness. And that's about it for me.
And my only final thoughts are that just make sure that you actually study and understand all of the documentation that's required. And as you would do in any part of your business, just step by step, put all your paperwork in, and make sure you have all your documentation one at a time, and then get ready to process.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're
Well,
with a community bank, you know, reach out to those individuals, because the word that I have from some of my friends who are with the local community, smaller banks, that they are very well positioned and ready to help on an individualized basis.
so thank you, Mr. Bob, and we'll connect with you on that as well, so that we can share that information with all participants. Thank you all so much for your participation, and we wish you all the best, and we wish you a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.